indeed a certain similitude to each other, but differ from each other. For all of them are conversant with the communion of words and actions, but they differ because one of them is conversant with the truth which is in them, but the others are conversant with the delectable, and of this, viz. The delectable, one kind consists in jest, but another in all the concerns of life. We must, therefore, also speak concerning these, in order that we may in a greater degree perceive that in every thing the medium is laudable, but the extremes are neither right nor laudable, but reprehensible. Of these, therefore, the greater part also are anonymous, but we must endeavour in the same manner as in the rest to give names to them for the sake of perspicuity, and the facility of understanding what follows. With respect to truth, therefore, the middle character may be called veracious, and the medium truth, but of dissimulation, that kind which exaggerates may be called arrogance, and he who possesses it an arrogant man, and that which extenuates may be called irony, and he who employs it may be denominated ironical, or a dissembler. With respect however to the delectable, and that kind which consists in jest, the middle character indeed may be called facetious, and the disposition itself facetiousness, but the excess may be denominated scurrility, and he who possesses it a scurrilous man. And he who is deficient may be called a rustic man, and the habit itself rusticity. In the other species of the delectable, which pertains to the concerns of life, he who delights in such a way as is proper, is a friend, and the medium is friendship, but he who exceeds, if it is not with a view to any advantage, is studious of pleasing, but if for the sake of advantage, is a flatterer. And he who is deficient, and in all things unpleasant, is contentious, and difficult to be pleased. There are, likewise, media in the passions, and in things pertaining to the passions. For bashfulness is not a virtue, and yet the modest man is praised. For in these things, one indeed is called the middle character, another is said to exceed, and another to be deficient. And he indeed who exceeds and is bashful in all things, is as it were astounded, but he who is deficient, and is not ashamed of any thing, is impudent. And the middle character is the modest man. Indignation is a medium between envy and joy for the calamities of others. But these habits are conversant with the pain and pleasure arising from what happens to others. For he who is propense to indignation is indeed pained from those that do well undeservedly. But he who is envious, surpassing the indignant man, is pained from all that do well. And he who rejoices in the calamities of others, is so much deficient in feeling pain from the prosperity of bad men, that he is delighted with it. These things, however, are discussed by us elsewhere, i.e. in the second book of the Rhetoric. With respect to justice, however, since it is not predicated simply, we shall make it the subject of discussion hereafter, viz. The fifth book, and show how each of its parts is a medium. In a similar manner also we shall speak concerning the rational or intellectual virtues in the sixth book. CHAPTER 8. Since, however, there are three dispositions of the soul, two indeed of vices, of which the one subsists according to excess, but the other according to defect, and since virtue is one of these dispositions, and is a medium, all these three dispositions are in a certain respect opposed to all. For the extremes are contrary to the middle, and to each other, but the middle is contrary to the extremes. For as the equal is, with reference to the less, greater, but with reference to the greater, less. Thus the middle habits exceed with reference to the deficiencies, but are defective with reference to the excesses, both in passions and actions. For the brave with reference to the timid man appears to be audacious, but with reference to the audacious man, timid. In a similar manner also, the temperate man with reference to him who is insensate appears to be intemperate, but with reference to the intemperate man, insensate. But the liberal, when contrasted with the illiberal man, appears to be a prodigal, but when compared with the prodigal, illiberal. Hence, the extremes propel the medium each to the other, and the timid calls indeed the brave man audacious, but the audacious man calls him timid, and analogously in the other extremes. These, however, being thus opposed to each other, there is a greater contrariety in the extremes to each other than to the medium. For these are more remote from each other than from the medium, just as the great is more remote from the small, and the small from the great, than both of them from the equal. Farther still, in some extremes there appears to be a certain similitude to the medium, as in audacity to fortitude, and in prodigality to liberality, but in the extremes there is the greatest dissimilitude to each other. Things, however, which are very distant from each other are defined to be contraries, so that those things which are more distant are more contrary to each other. But to the medium, in some things indeed, the deficiency is more opposed, and in others the excess. Thus to fortitude, audacity, indeed, which is an excess, is not opposed, but timidity, which is a defect. And to temperance, the want of sensibility, which is an indigence, is not opposed, but intemperate, which is an excess. This, however, happens from two causes, one indeed from the thing itself. For one of the extremes being near to, and more similar to the medium than the other, hence not this, but the contrary is more opposed to it. Thus, for instance, since audacity appears to be more similar and nearer to fortitude, but timidity appears to be more dissimilar, on this account we oppose the latter to fortitude, rather than the former. For things which are more distant from the medium appear to be more contrary. This, therefore, is one cause from the thing itself, but another cause is from ourselves. For those vices, to which we are naturally more adapted, appear to be more contrary to the medium. Thus, because we are naturally more adapted to pleasures, we are more easily impelled to intemperance, than to moderation in the pursuit of pleasure. Those things, therefore, are said to be in a greater degree contraries to which a greater accession is made. And on this account, intemperance, which is an excess, is more contrary to temperance, than the other extreme. CHAPTER 9. That ethical virtue, therefore, is a medium, and how it is so, and that it is a medium between two vices, the one existing according to excess, but the other according to defect, and that it is such in consequence of looking to the medium in passions and actions as to a mark, has been sufficiently shown. Hence, also, it is laborious to be worthy. For in every thing it is laborious to obtain the middle. Thus the middle of a circle cannot be discovered by every one, but by him who is skilled in geometry. In like manner to be angry, and to give and spend money, is in the power of every one, and is easy. But to be angry, and to give and spend money to whom, and as much, and when, and on what account, and as it is proper, cannot be accomplished by every one, nor is it easy. For this is to act rightly, and is rare, and laudable, and beautiful. Hence it is necessary that he whose attention is directed to the medium as to a mark, should first recede from that which is more contrary, as Calypso also admonishes, far from the smoke, and waves direct the helm. For of the extremes, the one indeed is more erroneous, but the other less. Since therefore it is difficult to obtain the medium accurately by making a second navigation, as they say, the least of the evils must be assumed, but this will especially be effected in the way we have mentioned. It is likewise requisite to consider what the vices are to which we are most propense. For different men are naturally prone to different vices, but this will be known from the pleasure and pain with which we are affected. We ought, however, to draw ourselves to the contrary part. For by removing ourselves very far from error, we shall arrive at the medium, which those do who straighten distorted pieces of wood. But in every thing we should especially avoid the delectable and pleasure, for we are not uncorrupted judges of it. In the same manner, therefore, as the Trojan nobles were affected towards Helen, we ought to be affected towards pleasure, and in every thing, where pleasure is concerned, to employ their decision. For thus, by dismissing it, we shall err in a less degree. By thus acting, therefore, in short, we shall be especially able to obtain the medium. Perhaps, however, this is difficult, and principally in particulars. For it is not easy to determine how, and with whom, and on what account, and for how long a time it is requisite to be angry. For we indeed sometimes praise those who are defective in anger, and call them mild. but at other times we praise those who are exasperated, and call them virile. He, however, who deviates but a little